So as the conflict in Iran, especially around the Strait of Hormuz, continues to have reverberating effects across the world, especially with nations buckling under the weight of having no gas or higher gas prices, and recently 40 nations, with the help of the UK, gathering together to discuss reopening the Strait of Hormuz, and Trump making very important new statements and other pieces of news, I thought I'd go over some new geopolitical analysis and give some thoughts on some crazy different things in understanding this entire chess piece geopolitical strategy that many people I feel like are having some confusion over. So let's get right into it. So Trump just recently truthed this statement. He said, with a little more time, we can easily open the Hormuz Strait, take the oil, and make a fortune. It would be a gusher for the world with question marks. The UK Prime Minister Starmer said, quote, "It is now clear that the impact of this war will affect the future of our country and that the military planners will meet to discuss how to make Hormuz Strait accessible and safe after the war." And specifically, he says, I do have to level with people on this. This will not be easy. Now, many other nations have said the same things. Now, if they're getting talking points, whatever it is, they're saying it will not be easy. And then more than 40 nations press Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz as the UK gathers them over a virtual meeting. Now, the details of what they said, I'm not quite sure. I haven't seen some of that stuff. But notably, the US was not there, President Trump being absent from that meeting. And the nations that have attended know that Trump has recently called for them pulling out of NATO and especially having less traditional security commitments, meaning that they aren't going to be wanting to police that area. Trump, the military, the White House have specifically said, we are not the ones that should be responsible for being able to control and dictate this area, but rather you guys should pull your weight. And that's interesting because just in the last day or so, and coming from several news outlets, is that French-owned container ships and some, I believe, Japanese container ships from the beginning of this conflict, this war, from more than a month ago, have now just reported going through the Strait of Hormuz, that they were safely able to pass through without any issue whatsoever. Now, these are massive container ships, and some of them being held up in the Persian Gulf, they were able to safely pass through it. And now, based on some geo-trackers where you can track container ships, they're well on their way to their destination. Specifically, this ship, CMA CGM, was the first one through, and this is according to the AIS system, which is the Automated Identification System. So this begs the question, who really is in control in the sense of, does Iran still have control over the strait so that they can make their threats and then have the whole world on their knees? Or is it the US, for which many people have theorized that they have total control over that area, meaning with the amount of military presence there, especially if you understand that their U.S. Navy and some Air Force airstrips, and many other bases are right along here in Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, the UAE. Supposedly more than a third of the naval fleet is in this area. And by dominating Iranian airspace and many more targets being destroyed, that effectively means that possibly, and again, I'm just saying possibly, they would have control over this area. And supposedly even Iran has said, hey, the strait is open, you can pass through. But many people, out of fear of not wanting to be attacked or caught in this crossfire, are not really believing that that is true. And so what's the issue? Who has control and what's going to happen? And how is this going to impact international waters and maritime law going forward? Because again, you got to remember that those waters are international waters, meaning that it should be freely used for people to pass through. And this cannot be controlled by any one nation, especially the country of Iran. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the historical context, meaning that from 1971, after getting off the gold standard, many of the world, basically the whole world, moved to the global petrodollar system that many of us know today. And the theory goes like this, for which many of us have been saying, but also has been deemed as, in some sense, a conspiracy, but Iran's military has been used as a proxy army to control output on oil from the Gulf. And what that means is that NATO countries or other deep state strongholds or other people behind the scenes are effectively giving them independence or quote unquote independence, such that behind closed doors, whatever the deep state or these guys want to do, especially with the armament, the nuclear armament and many other things, they're letting them be as this free roaming nation. But really what they're doing is taking control of that strait, of the output, such that they can dictate the oil prices and the free will of the sovereign world, basically. And over time, what has happened is that the U.S. was made, in some sense, to have a heavier burden of carrying the weight of military patrol and policing some of those international waters for the safety and, in some sense, the freeloading or leeching of these other nations, especially the NATO nations and also the Eastern Asian nations. And what may be happening right now is that Trump, the White Hats, these guys are waiting for two things. Number one, they're waiting to expose and correct perception. John Conrad says this: spent all day in D.C. talking to Navy and military sources, my Hormuz hypothesis stands. The Navy appears to be in no rush to reopen the strait. The question remains, what is this administration trying to leverage? Nobody I talked to is even willing to discuss that until European politicians and media stop calling Americans war criminals and monsters. And guess what? Even most liberals I talk to are getting tired of it. The only people pleased with the anti-American rhetoric vomiting out of Europe are the far left and a large segment of PhDs in academia and think tanks. I have no idea when the strait will reopen, but if the price is a modicum of cooperation and respect for everything America has done for decades to keep Europe safe, the strait could stay closed for months or turn into a toll booth for years, because the majority of Americans and the vast majority of Trump admin officials I've talked to seem fed up with their arrogance. So I'm reading this quote because he's mentioning that so many people have this skewed perception of what the U.S. is doing, and also making it look like they are the evil, quote-unquote, war criminals and monsters, when really there's more context behind what this whole Iranian situation, especially with the oil, the policing, the maritime waters, all of this is about. And this is why Trump has been advocating for other nations, NATO, and especially other nations that are benefiting from the oil, to step up and to have themselves go and police and dictate the terms and work with Iran or other nations in making sure that maritime waters are open to everybody. And the other perception I want to mention, and this is Carrie Kellerman who mentioned this, but she writes, they replaced reliable energy with ideology, and now they're out of options. This is the most predictable energy catastrophe since the 1970s oil embargo, except this time, Europe did it to themselves. And she's responding here to a post from Limitless where he says that the EU just issued energy lockdowns, and nobody is calling it what it is. The European Commission is urging Europeans to work from home, drive less, and fly less because of the Gulf conflict. Now, the point here is that there's a lot of hypocritical statements being made about many European countries wanting to be global, green, wind, and solar, and all these things, but really they're still benefiting and siphoning and having heavy dependence on oil. And until some of this perception and hypocrisy come to light and people admit that, yes, we are in need of oil. Yes, we want to pull our weight and help. Yes, we admit to the U.S. having a very heavy load and burden, and us freeloading off of that, and their military might and their presence is something that needs to be exposed and corrected, or at the very least acknowledged, instead of all these prime ministers and leaders coming out and speaking against the U.S., especially because they've clearly denied military access. They've said publicly, we don't want your military crossing our airspace during your war and your efforts. We're not going to help you. This is what many European countries have said. And Trump, because he's very upset about that and he's been public and vocal about that, I believe he's probably prolonging the opening of the strait when really they have the control already. Yes, there's some hiccups and rogue things for which it could be unpredictable with some ships passing and it being attacked. But for the most part, I believe Trump is holding out, and he wants to make sure that some of this is corrected. And the second thing I want to mention, apart from exposing and correcting perception, is number two, power balance and restoration. And as I mentioned, until some of these other nations come to admit and pull their weight and help in some way, Trump is going to probably continue extending this until they really feel the hurt and they have to do something about it. Many nations, especially here around Asia and other surrounding Pacific nations, they're feeling the blow of having no gas. And the longer this goes, the longer they're going to have to actually do something about it. So I believe there's a little bit of a waiting game with Trump and many others trying to sort this out so that power balance and restoration can be had. And however this works, there's some kind of a power balance and chess game going on such that he's rooting out some of the bad actors. He's rooting out some of the deep state such that they admit they release their control from the proxy army. And more importantly, allow the sovereign nations to each their own, have sovereignty over their own nations in policing and doing efforts such that it's not this global sort of effort. And so again, remember, Trump and many others, many believers like myself, were saying that anything towards globalization is not good. It has to be more localization, individual countries working without some dictatorship or top-down sort of power control controlling everything across the world. So whatever Trump is doing, whatever the White Hats are doing, something is happening, and it's all strategic. It's being done for a reason. And I believe that we are in the middle of some of the greatest rebalancing, some of the greatest restoration we've seen of a lifetime. So everything that's happened from the last 50, 100 plus years, all the way till now, the systematic decoupling, the dismantlement of this deep state, this black cat system, or whatever is happening, syndicate that's going on, these things are being removed slowly but surely, and it's being done systematically. And Trump has the control. He has all of the cards right now, and it's being done from a optics perspective, correcting perceptions of the left and many others. It's correcting, restoring certain things, especially among other nations and NATO nations. And then we're seeing the greatest rebalancing we've ever seen in a lifetime. So get excited. More to come. A lot of things are optics. You're going to see, of course, real war, real death, and many other things. But there's so many things happening behind the scenes that we're not privy to, but it's being done for a reason. You're going to see justice. You're going to see stuff happening with arrests and many other things. But we're seeing the White Hats play out this whole planned thing from the very beginning, and we're seeing it happen live. So be blessed, be encouraged. Guys, if you guys want to help me out, I have a ministry. I need all the support that I can get, doing a lot of different things in the background. If you guys want to help me out, the link is down below in the description. Love you guys. More to come. Talk to you guys very soon.